will never forget the look in her eyes the day she signed to me begging me for help. It was one of those quiet afternoons, the sun barely peeking through the blinds. I was cleaning the kitchen when little Maya, barely 7 years old, slipped into the room. She had been mute since birth, adopted into the family after a long and painful journey through the foster system. I had been working for the family as their maid for the past 2 years, and I knew Maya well by now. She never really spoke to anyone, communicated through hand signs, and I always made sure to listen carefully. But that day, she had a different look on her face. There was fear in her eyes. She wasn't signing her usual thank you or good morning, no. She was frantically moving her hands, almost shaking, as she tried to get her message across. Please, please, she signed over and over, pointing at her mouth and then at her chest, her hands trembling with panic. I bent down to her level, trying to understand what's wrong. Maya, I asked softly, though I knew she couldn't answer. I grabbed a notepad and a pen, hoping I could get something down. She took the pen from me, writing quickly. They're hiding something, I saw it. My heart sank. Maya had seen something. They seemed normal enough on the outsider, well-dressed, always friendly, but Maya had never been a troublemaker. She had always kept to herself, only occasionally asking for a glass of water or some food. She never played with the other kids, but now she seemed desperate. Her small hands trembling as she wrote more. There's blood, lots of blood. I could feel my blood run cold. This wasn't some childish game or misunderstanding. I had heard rumors around the neighborhood about the Clark family, whispers about how they had gotten rich, how they had a mysterious past, but I never thought much of it. What was I to do, a simple maid caught up in other people's lives? I had always kept my distance, but now I was tangled in something that I couldn't ignore. What did you see, Maya? I asked, taking her hands in mine, trying to calm her down. She pulled me toward the basement door. That was when I realized how serious she was. The Clark family always told me to stay out of the basement. Clark said it was for storage, and I never asked any more questions, but Maya was determined now, pulling me toward the door with urgency. I followed her down into the dark, cold B basement. It smelled musty old. There were old boxes stacked up high, just like I'd seen before. Maya led me to a far corner where a small metal door was partially open. She looked at me with wide, terrified eyes, then pointed to it. I knew I shouldn't have gone further, but I couldn't stop myself. The room behind the door was small, just a closet really, but what I saw inside I will never forget. There, lying on the floor, was a bloody tarp covered with what looked like pieces of a body. The silence was deafening. I backed away slowly, my breath catching in my throat. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs felt frozen. Maya signed quickly, urgently, call the police. I was frozen for a moment, unable to process everything, but then it hit me. Maya had seen everything, and she had known for a long time. She had been living in fear, hiding the truth from everyone, trying to warn me. I was the only one who knew now. I ran upstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking as I dialed 911. They've killed someone, please, you have to come, I said, barely able to get the words out. The operator asked me to stay calm and explain everything, but I couldn't. I was trembling, barely able to speak. I told them about the basement, the blood. I gave them the address, and they promised they'd send someone right away. I went back downstairs to find Maya sitting in the corner, hugging her knees to her chest, her eyes filled with fear. She looked up at me, silently pleading. I'm going to help you, Maya, I swear, I whispered, kneeling down beside her. Minutes later, sirens wailed in the distance. The police arrived, and I led them to the basement. They took over from there. I didn't see what happened next, whether they arrested Mr. and Mrs. Clark or what the investigation revealed. But I knew one thing for sure, Maya was safe. The truth came out. The Clark family wasn't just hiding blood. They were hiding years of abuse, of crimes. They had committed things that no one had ever suspected. It was horrifying to realize that such darkness had been right under my nose all along. Maya was taken to a safe place, away from the nightmare she'd lived through. I lost my job. Of course, the Clark family's wealth and power meant they could make things disappear. But Maya's safety meant everything to me. I knew that I had done the right thing. I had saved a child who had no voice but her hands. As for me, I still think about that night, about the silence Maya had lived in, and how in the end she had found a way to tell me what no one else would believe. And in the end she gave me the strength to speak up, even when I was SC. If Maya hadn't trusted me enough to sign her truth, I don't know what would have happened. But I'll always be grateful that the days after Maya was taken away, were the hardest. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, always replaying every detail in my mind, her wide eye. I thought about how she had lived in that house in silence, enduring horrors I couldn't even begin to understand. It broke my heart that I hadn't seen it sooner, that I hadn't noticed the small signs, the things Maya had tried to tell me in her own quiet. The police called me for a statement. They questioned me about everything I had seen Clark, how Maya had always seemed so distant, and how she had been terrified of certain places in the... They seemed to take it seriously, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the Clark family would somehow find a way to cover everything up. They were powerful, but I had already made up my mind, no matter what happened, I wasn't going to let Maya's suffering be IGN. Months passed. The investigation into the Clark family turned into a media frenzy. The police uncovered evidence of illegal activities, money laundering, trafficking, even. The family's wealth had been built on lies and violence hidden behind a carefully crafted image of respectability. The bodies they had buried in that basement were just the B. The more the police dug, the darker it got. And then there was the trial. I wasn't prepared for it. The courtroom was packed with reporters, the air thick with tent. Clark was calm, almost cold, her lawyer by her side, as if she were untouchable. Clark, on the other hand, was a wreck, shaking, sweating, but still trying to maintain some shred of dignity. They both denied They claimed that Maya had made it up, that it was all a misunderstanding, but their lies couldn't cover up Maya's testimony was the hardest thing I had ever witnessed. She was so brave sitting there, her small hands moving slowly as she signed everything she had seen, the blood, the body, Her hands shook, but her eyes, they were filled with something I hadn't expected. Maya, who had never said a word in her life, had finally found her voice. I watched as the jurors listened, their faces hardening as they realized the depth of the darkness they were hearing about. I couldn't even imagine what it was like, for she had done it. She had brought down the people who had hurt her, the people who had thought they could hide their crimes, for I was just a witness, a maid who had stumbled onto a truth I couldn't ignore. But Maya, she was the one who had shown us all. In the end, Mr. and Mrs. Clark were convicted on multiple charges, including murder, child abuse, and trafficking. They were both sentenced to life, and it wasn't justice for all the lives they had destroyed, but it was some. Maya was placed into a new foster home, a family that actually cared for her. They were kind, patient. It took a long time, but little by little Maya started to open up. She learned to write, to express herself in ways she hadn't, but her new family was patient, never pushing her to speak, but always encouraging her to communicate however I visited Maya a few months after the trial. She recognized me instantly, her eyes lighting up as she waved her hands excitedly. She was smiling, truly smiling, for the first time since I had known. It was a small thing, but it meant the world. She signed to me that day, "Thank you for helping me," you say. I hugged her then, something I hadn't done before, but it felt right. Maya had shown me a strength I couldn't have imagined, and in return I had helped her find her. It was about her, about giving her a chance to live without fear, without S. I went back to my life, but I never forgot Maya. Her bravery stayed with me, and it reminded me that sometimes the truth doesn't have to be. It can be quiet, subtle, whispered in a way that only the right person will hear. Maya had spoken without a single word, and in doing so, she had changed everything. As for the Clark family, I don't know what happened to them in prison. I didn't want to know. I didn't care. All that mattered was that Maya was free, and she would never have to live in that silence again. Months passed, and life slowly returned to some semblance of normalcy for me, though I couldn't stop thinking about Maya. I still kept in touch with her foster family, checking in from time to time. Each update I received made my heart feel a little lighter. Maya was blossoming into someone I hadn't recognized when she first came into my life, a child who was learning to trust again, to laugh again, to be a child again. One afternoon, I received a phone call from her new mother. Her voice was warm, but there was a note of uncertainty in it. "Hello, is this Mrs. Perez?" she asked. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Yes, it's me. I wanted to let you know that Maya, she's asking about you. She wants to see you. We were wondering if you could visit, if you feel comfortable with that." A flood of emotion swept through me. The thought of seeing Maya again after all that had happened felt like both a relief and a weight. It had been months since the trial, and though I had always kept her in my heart, I wasn't sure if I was ready to face her in person again. I thought about how much she had been through, how much she had endured, but something in me knew this was important. Maya had already given me so much, her trust, her bravery, and now it was my turn to give her something too. It was time to let her know that she wasn't alone, that I was still there for her, even if I had to do it in a different way. "I'd love to see her," I said, my voice trembling just a little. When is a good time? We arranged for me to visit the next week. That entire week I couldn't stop thinking about Maya, about how she had been so small and so scared when I first met her, and how she had saved herself by showing the world the truth. Even when it meant risking everything, she had been my hero all along. When I finally walked through the door of her new home, I felt a wave of emotion flood over me. Maya was sitting on the couch, her new mother beside her, both of them looking up as I entered. For a moment, Maya just stared at me, her eyes wide and cautious, but then she stood up slowly. She walked toward me and without a word wrapped her arms around my waist. I could feel the strength in her embrace, a strength that she hadn't had when I first met her. The fear was gone now, replaced by something different, something hopeful. I missed you. She signed, her fingers moving carefully, yet with purpose. I missed you too, Maya, I said, my voice breaking as I spoke. You've been so brave, I'm so proud of you. She smiled, her small hands moving swiftly. You helped me find my voice. I will always be strong because of you. Her words didn't come through in spoken language, but the weight of them settled into my heart. She was strong, I had witnessed that strength, but now seeing her in front of me, I realized how much it had truly changed her. She wasn't the same child I had first met. She was so much more than. We spent the afternoon together talking through her foster mother, who acted as a translator for Maya's signs. Maya showed me her room, her books, and the little projects she had. She was learning to read and write, something she hadn't been able to do before, and I could see how proud she was of her pro. It was clear that she was in a good place now, a place where she could grow, a place where she could finally be herself without Faye. Before I left, Maya gave me a small drawing, a picture of her smiling, holding hands with a figure that I recognized as me. I could hardly hold back the tears as I took the drawing. It was simple, but it was everything. It was her way of telling me that she had healed, that she was okay, and that I had been a part of that healing. You're going to be okay, I whispered, stroking her hair gently. You're going to have a beautiful. She signed back. Thank you, I already. I left their house with a heart full of peace, knowing that Maya's life was no longer defined by the pain of her she had found her own way out of. The darkness, and though I had been a part of that journey, it was her strength that had carried her through. She had saved her, and in that quiet, humble moment I realized that sometimes the most powerful things don't come in loud, dramatic acts of hero. Sometimes it's the small, quiet actions, those little moments of courage that change every. Maya had given me the greatest gift of all, the understanding that silence can speak louder than words, and that even the smallest hands can hold the power to change the world. I knew without a doubt that Maya's story was far from over, and I would always be there in whatever way I could to remind her of how brave she truly. It had been nearly a year since that visit, and Maya had come so far. Every update I received from her foster family told a story of a child slowly coming into her own, thriving despite everything she had. She was learning to trust again, making friends and finding joy in things that once seemed impossible. It was a relief to know that the trauma she had endured wasn't defining her anymore. It was just a chapter in a much bigger one. Day I got a call from her foster mother. Her voice sounded different this time, and there was an urgency in her. I think you should come, she said. Maya's ready to see you again, and this time she wants to speak to you. She's been pracked. We're not sure if she'll be able to say much, but we want you to be here when she tread. My heart skipped a beat. After all this time, Maya wanted to speak, actually speak. I had always known that Maya's journey would take time, and I was happy to watch her grow at her own pace, but this was huge. She was taking another monumental step forward, and it was one I wasn't sure she would be ready for until much later. I agreed right away and made arrangements too. When I walked through the door, Maya was waiting for me. She was sitting at the kitchen table, a glass of water in front of her, but there was something different about. There was a calmness to her now, a certain stillness in her posture that made her seem older, wiser than her. She looked up at me as I entered the room, her eyes steady, and for the first time I saw something new: hope, not just the hope that came from being safe or free from fear, but hope in her. She wasn't afraid. Hi, she said, her voice soft but clear. It was shaky, a little uncertain, but it was unmistakably her. Maya was speaking. My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't expected it. I don't think I even realized how much I had hoped for this moment until it happened. She had been working on this all on her for so long. Her silence had been her shield, her way of coping with a world that had hurt her, and now she was choosing to break that silence, piece by piece, and allow herself to be. Hi, Maya, I said, my voice cracking as I stepped closer. You're doing so. She smiled shyly, her fingers trembling a little as she placed them on the table. "I've been practicing," she said again, this time with a little more confidence. "I wanted to thank." I sat down beside her, trying to keep my composure, though the tears were threatening to spill. Maya had gone through so much, but here she was, speaking healing, reclaiming her. "You don't have to thank me, Maya," I whispered, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "You've done all the hard. You found your voice, and that's the most important." She nodded, looking down at her hands for a moment, her face softening. "I don't remember much of before, but I remember you." She paused, taking a deep. "You were the first one who listened. You helped me when no one else could." I was at a loss for words. All I could do was reach out and hug her. She leaned into me, her small frame almost fragile. But there was a quiet strength in the way she held it. It was as if she was telling me, "I'm here, I'm okay. Now I'm not that scared little girl." For the rest of the afternoon, we spent time together, talking, laughing, and just being in the... Maya told me about the new things she had learned, her favorite books, her new friends, her plans for the future. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was. As I left their house that day, I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of pride, for Maya had come so far, and though the scars of her past would always be a part of her they no longer control, she had taken control contour of her own life, and in doing so had become someone I could only describe as truly Ramar. Before I left, I turned to her and smiled. "You've done amazing, Maya. I'll always be here for you, and I'm so proud." She looked at me, her face serious, but her eyes shining. "I'll never forget what you did for me. I'll keep going forward. I'm strong because..." And as I walked out of the door, I realized that Maya's story wasn't just one of survival. It was a story of resilience, of breaking free from the past and finding a new path. Her silence had been broken, but her strength remained. She was no longer defined by the trauma of her. She had created her own future, one where her voice, though quiet at first, would no longer be. I knew Maya would go on to do great things to help others who had suffered like she had to show them that they, too, could find their strength, their voice, and their hey there. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit subscribe to join me for more powerful real-life stories that spark change and inspire strength. Together we can explore stories of resilience, justice, and the moments that make a difference. Your support helps amplify voices that need to be heard, so let's grow this community of change makers. Click subscribe now, and let's continue this journey together. And in that moment, I realized something that I hadn't understood before. Sometimes the most powerful stories aren't the ones we tell, but the ones we live. Years have passed since that moment. I still think about Maya often, about the girl who once lived in silence, trapped by fear, and who slowly rebuilt herself into someone unrecognizable. A part of me always wonders how she's doing, how far she's come. But I no longer feel the heavy weight of worry or fear that once consumed me when I thought of her in gratitude. Maya is 18 now, a young woman on the brink of her future, and when I see her again, she has blossomed into someone who knows her worth, someone who understands her own strength, and to my amazement, she has become a voice for others, not just for herself. I got a call from her last week. Her voice was no longer unsure, no longer tentative. It was clear, strong. She told me she had been working on a project, something that had been a dream of hers for a long time. She was starting an outreach program for young people who had been through trauma, kids in the foster system, children who had been abused, those who had been silenced. She wanted to create a space where they could find their own voices, a safe place to heal and grow. "I want to help them," she said, "just like you helped me." I couldn't hold back the tears. The girl who had been so afraid to speak, the one who had been trapped in a world where she couldn't express herself, had found her purpose. She was doing exactly what she had dreamed of all those years ago, giving a voice to those who had none. Her program was just starting, but it already had a profound impact on those it reached. Maya wasn't just a survivor, she had become a guide for others, showing them that there was always a way out, always a chance to heal, no matter how deep the wounds were. Her story wasn't just about surviving the past. It was about shaping the future, using her experiences to light the way for others. She told me about one of the young girls she'd recently met, a 12-year-old who had gone through the same kind of abuse Maya had. The girl was quiet, afraid to trust, unwilling to speak, but Maya knew exactly how to reach her. Slowly, carefully, she helped the girl open up, and little by little she saw the same transformation she had gone through herself. "She's starting to talk now," Maya said. "She's not afraid anymore. It's like she's starting to believe in herself, just like I did." It was one of the most powerful moments of my life. I had always known that Maya had the potential to change the world, But hearing her speak about her work with such passion, such purpose, from a child who couldn't speak to becoming the person who would give others the courage to do the same. Maya had not only reclaimed her own life, but now she was helping others do the same. We met in person soon after that call. She looked older, more confident, but still with that familiar spark of kindness in her eyes. When she hugged me, I felt the weight of everything that had passed the fear. She had always been strong, but now she was channeling that strength into something greater than I could have ever imagined. "I never could have done any of this without you," she said quietly, a tear slipping down her cheek. "You were the one who showed me I was worth something." I shook my head, brushing away my own tears. "No, Maya, you found your own voice. You always had it." She smiled, a radiant, confident smile that was all her own, as I watched her walk away full of determination with a future ahead of her that she had carved for herself. I felt a sense of peace. Maya's journey wasn't just a story of rescue or survival. It was a story of reclaiming her power, of finding a way to rise from the ashes of her past and build something beautiful. And as I drove away from our meeting, I thought about how much Maya had taught me over the years. She had shown me that strength isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's found in silence, and it's not just about surviving the storms of life. It's about learning to stand tall in the aftermath, to rebuild, and to help others do the same. Maya was no longer the scared little girl who had signed to me in desperation. She was a force in her own right, a leader. She had not just survived her past, she had transformed it into something that would change the future. And I realized that the greatest gift I had ever given her was not just my help, but my belief in her. Because Maya always had it in her. She just needed someone to remind her of that, and now she was reminding the world. Months passed and Maya's program continued to grow. It was gaining attention both locally and nationally. More and more young people were finding their way to her, drawn by the idea of someone who understood, who had been where they were, and who knew how to show them the way out. Maya's reach extended beyond what I had ever imagined. She became an advocate, a voice for those who had been silenced by their pasts, and her story resonated with anyone who had ever been through trauma or pain. One day I got an invitation from her. She was holding a charity gala for the outreach program, a chance to raise money and awareness to bring in more resources for the kids who needed them. She had asked me to attend as a special guest, and I knew immediately that I couldn't miss it. It was surreal to think about how far she had come from that terrified little girl who had been too afraid to speak to this young woman organizing an event that would change lives. The night of the gala arrived, and when I stepped into the venue, I could hardly recognize it. The room was filled with people, donors, philanthropists, and others who were there to support Maya's cause. There was a stage at the front, decorated with soft lighting, and tables of guests who were chatting and laughing, many of whom were wearing elegant dresses and suits, but all I could think about was Maya, standing in the center of it all, her eyes scanning the crowd with quiet confidence. As soon as I saw her, she spotted me across the room and made her way over. She looked stunning, dressed in a simple yet elegant black dress, her hair pulled back into a sleek ponytail, but it was her smile that stood out most, the same smile I had seen years ago, but now it was full of warmth and strength. "You made it," she exclaimed, pulling me into a tight hug. "I wouldn't have missed it for the world," I said, my voice filled with emotion. "This is amazing, Maya. You've built something incredible." She laughed, a soft sound that was full of joy. "It's not just me, it's all the kids. We're all in this together, but I couldn't have done any of it without you. You helped me believe I could do this. You helped me find my strength." I shook my head, feeling a bit overwhelmed. "You've done all the hard work. You've given them hope, Maya. You've shown them that their past doesn't define them." Maya paused for a moment, her gaze steady. "And I want to keep showing them that. I want to keep helping them find their voices, just like I did. But I need people to see it. I need people to know that healing is possible." As the night went on, I watched as Maya took the stage, her presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. She spoke about her journey, about the struggles she had faced, and how she had turned her pain into something meaningful. She talked about the kids in her program, the ones who were still finding their way, the ones who hadn't yet learned to trust, but who were now slowly beginning to believe in themselves because of her. "I was once silent, lost, afraid of what would happen if I spoke," Maya said, her eyes scanning the room, meeting the gaze of everyone in the crowd. "But now I know that silence is not the end. It's only the beginning. If we listen to each other, if we believe in each other, we can heal." The room fell quiet, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house. The truth in her words was undeniable, and the impact of her journey was evident to everyone who had the privilege of hearing her speak. After the speech, people came up to her, congratulating her, offering their support. Maya was no longer the frightened girl I had first met. She was a leader, a beacon of hope for so many. She had built something that was changing lives, and she had done it with the strength and resilience she had found within herself. I stood back watching her, and for a moment it hit. Methy was her purpose. This was what she was meant to do. She had turned her pain into power, her silence into a voice that spoke louder than anything I could have ever imagined. As the evening came to a close, Maya approached me one last time. There was a look in her eye, a quiet understanding, a sense of peace that I had never seen before. She wasn't just healing from her past anymore, she was shaping her future, and she was bringing others with her. "You've given me so much, and I just wanted to say thank you," she said softly. I smiled, reaching out to hold her hand. "You never needed me to believe in you. Maya, you've always believed in yourself. You just needed to see it. I'm so proud of you. I always will be." And in that moment I knew that Maya had not only found her voice, but she had found her place in the world. She was helping others find theirs, showing them that no matter how dark their past had been, there was always a way to break free and find the light. As I left the Gaia that night, I couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment. Maya had made it. She had overcome everything that had once seemed impossible. She had become not just a survivor, but a warrior, and now she was giving others the tools to fight their own battles. Her story was still unfolding, but I knew that no matter what came next, Maya was ready for it. She had found her strength, her voice, and her purpose, and there was nothing that could take that away. The weeks following the gala were a blur of activity for Maya and her program. The attention she had garnered from the event led to increased donations and more volunteers eager to help. The momentum behind her outreach grew rapidly, and with it, Maya's influence. She was invited to speak at schools, community centers, and conferences, spreading the message that healing, though painful and slow, was always possible. I watched from a distance, amazed at how effortlessly she seemed to slip into this new role. It was as if she had been born for this, as if everything she had gone through had been preparing her for this moment. But when I saw her in person again, I saw a glimpse of the toll it was taking on her. I visited her one evening after one of her speaking engagements, noticing the exhaustion in her eyes despite the success of her program and the lives she was touching. I could tell that the weight of her past was still there, quietly lingering in the background. "You look tired," I said gently as I sat down across from her in her cozy apartment where she lived with a couple of roommates who also worked with the outreach program. "You've been doing so much. Are you taking care of yourself?" Maya sighed, leaning back on the couch, her hands folded in her lap. "I feel like I have to keep going, like I can't stop. You know, there's always someone else who needs help. And every time I speak to someone, I just feel like I have to do more." I understood what she meant. She was on a mission, and her mission was important. But I could see she was carrying a heavy burden, known that despite all the progress she had made, she hadn't yet fully let go of. The trauma, the abuse, the fear, it still haunted her in quiet moments like this, when the noise of the world faded away and she was left alone with her thoughts. "Maya, it's okay to rest," I said softly. "You're doing more than enough. You've already changed so many lives. But you can't help others if you're running on empty. You have to take care of yourself too." She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see that she was processing my words. She was always so determined, so focused on helping everyone else, but I knew she still had healing to do herself. Her past might not have defined her, but it had shaped her. And there were days when the weight of that past was still there, even if she didn't always show it. "I know," she said quietly, "but it's hard. Some days it feels like if I stop, everything will come crashing down. Like if I don't keep pushing forward, everything I've built will disappear." I reached out and placed my hand gently over hers. "Maya, you don't have to carry all of this alone. You've created something incredible, but you don't have to be the only one holding it together. It's okay to let people help you. It's okay to take a break." She smiled at me, the same smile that had always been there, even in the darkest of times. But now it was filled with something else, understanding. She had built this program from the ground up, and she had fought for every inch of progress, but as much as she had given to others, she still needed to give something to herself. "I guess I've never really learned how to take care of myself, have I?" she said, her voice almost a whisper. I shook my head, my heart swelling with affection for her. "You're still learning, and that's okay. But don't forget that you're just as worthy of care and love as the people you're helping. You deserve that too." For a moment there was a silence between us, a kind of peaceful understanding. Maya was always giving, always reaching out to others, but now she was realizing that she could give to herself too, that she didn't have to be everything to everyone. She could be enough just as she was. That night, she promised me she would take some time to rest, to step back a little from the whirlwind of her work. She needed to recharge, to reconnect with the person she had been before all the work and the pressure had consumed her. It wasn't a surrender, it was a choice to honor herself as much as she honored the people she was helping. Weeks passed and Maya kept her promise. She took more breaks, spent time with her friends, and even started therapy, something she had been hesitant about before. Slowly, the exhaustion in her eyes started to fade. She began to find a balance, learning how to care for herself while still doing the work that had become her life's purpose. One afternoon, she called me, her voice full of excitement. "I've got something to show you." When I arrived, Maya handed me a small, neatly wrapped box. Inside was a bracelet, simple yet beautiful, with a small charm in the shape of a hand reaching upward, fingers spread wide. "This is for you," she said, her voice soft. "You helped me find my strength, my voice. You gave me the courage to step into this role. And now I want you to have something to remind you that you're part of this journey too." I held the bracelet in my hand, tears welling up in my eyes. "Maya, this is beautiful. I don't even know what to say." She smiled, her eyes shining. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that you're always with me. Even when we're not together, you're a part of this too." And in that moment, I realized how much we had both grown. Maya had found her voice, and in doing so, she had given others the courage to find theirs. But she had also learned. That part of healing was learning to rest, to nurture herself, to not carry the world on her shoulders alone. She was strong not because she never faltered, but because she had learned to stand up, to keep going, and to ask for help when she needed it. Maya had become a leader, a voice for the voiceless, but she was also learning how to live for herself, to find peace in the midst of the chaos. It wasn't perfect. There were still hard days, but I knew that she would continue to thrive, not just because of her resilience, but because she had learned the most important lesson of all. True strength comes from embracing both the light and the dark, and knowing that it's okay to rest when the journey gets too hard. Months passed and Maya's program continued to grow, but so did Maya herself. She was learning to balance the work she loved with the care she needed to give herself. Her program was now reaching more communities, providing not just a safe space for young people to heal, but also offering resources, mentorship, and opportunities for those who had faced trauma and abuse to rebuild their lives. Maya had transformed not only her own life, but the lives of many others. However, there were days when she still felt the weight of her past creeping in, when the memories would return unbidden, or when the pressure of everything she had built threatened to overwhelm her, but she had learned how to deal with it. She no longer let the burden consume her. Maya had become more attuned to her own needs, learning how to take moments for herself without guilt, whether that meant taking a walk, spending time with friends, or simply being still with her thoughts. One particular afternoon, I received a message from Maya. She asked me to meet her at a quiet park somewhere used to go when we first started to reconnect after the trial, a place where we could just be without any expectations. I agreed without hesitation. When I arrived, Maya was sitting on a bench gazing out at the lake. The sun was starting to set, casting a warm golden glow across the water. There was a peacefulness about her that I hadn't seen before. It was as though the storm she had lived through had passed, and she had found a place of calm amidst the chaos. She smiled when she saw me and motioned for me to sit beside her. "I've been thinking a lot lately," Maya began, her voice softer than usual, "about everything that's happened, about everything we've been through." I nodded, not sure where she was going, but knowing it was something important. "There are days when it feels like I'm still the scared little girl," she continued, her hands moving slowly as she spoke, like no matter how much I try to move forward, that part of me will always be there, just under the surface. But then there are other days when I realize it's not the past that defines me anymore. It's the choices I make now, the things I do with my life today. I looked at her, understanding what she meant. Maya had spent so much time trying to outrun her past, to bury it and build some. But now she was learning that her past, though painful, was not something to be afraid of. It was a part of her, yes, but it didn't have to control. "I'm proud of you, Maya," I said, my voice thick with, "You've come so far, but I think you're finally starting to see what I've always seen in you. You've always had the strength to heal, and now you're showing the world how it She smiled at me, her eyes filled with quiet gratitude. I've learned that healing isn't linear. It's messy, and it's not always easy, but it's the breeze picked up, rustling the leaves in the trees. We sat there for a long time just talking about everything and nothing. There was something so comforting in that silence between us. It wasn't uncomfortable or heavy. It was a peace that we had both earned through the struggles, the pain, and the triumphs. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Maya turned to me with a small, "I've been thinking about something else too," she said, her voice quieter now. "I don't think I can do this forever. The program, the speeches, the outreach, I don't want to let go, but I'm starting to wonder if there's something else for me, something I haven't figured out yet." I paused, unsure of what she meant. "What do you mean?" I asked. Gently, "I've given everything I have to the kids who need help, but I feel like there's a part of me that's still waiting to figure out what's next for me beyond the program. Maybe I need to take a step back and figure out what I want outside of all of this, not for the program, not for anyone else, but for me." I could see it now, the way Maya had been pushing herself so hard for so long, the way she had become so attached to her mission that she sometimes forgot to think about her own needs, her own dreams. "I think that's okay, Maya," I said softly. "You've given so much to others. You don't have to have everything figured out. Sometimes just giving yourself permission to explore the next step is the first step." Maya looked at me, her eyes thoughtful. "You're right. Maybe it's time for me to take a break, just for a little while, and see what else is out there. I've spent so much time looking out for everyone else. I think it's time I start looking inward." I smiled, feeling a deep sense of pride and understanding. Maya had always been someone who gave, someone who poured everything into helping, but now she was learning the most important lesson of all, that self-care wasn't selfish. It was necessary. She needed to take time for herself to reconnect with who she was outside of her work, outside of the role she had built. "For whatever you decide to do, I'll support you," I said, my voice filled with certainty. "You've always known what's right for you, even when you didn't think you did." Maya smiled softly, a contented sigh escaping her lips. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars slowly appear in the night sky. She had already accomplished so much, and now she was learning that the most important part of the journey was the one that lay. Maya had found her voice, and now she was finding her way. And I knew whatever direction she chose, she would always carry the strength and resilience that had gotten her this far. The future was wide open, and I had no doubt that whatever Maya chose to do, it would be something extraordinary. Months passed since that conversation, and I could see the change. She had taken some time off from the program, stepping away from the constant whirlwind of meetings and speaking engagement. She wasn't disappearing. She was simply allowing herself the space to breathe, to reflect, and to figure out what she truly wanted for herself. It wasn't easy. At first, she had built her entire life around helping others, and the absence of that responsibility felt strange at times, but slowly Maya began to realize that she didn't need to keep running at full speed to be valuable. She could still make a difference, but it didn't have to come at the expense of her own well-being. She started traveling. She went to places she had always wanted to visit without any agenda other than to experience the world for herself. She would send me photos from the mountains in Colorado, from quiet beaches in California, and even from a small town in Italy where she had decided to spend a few weeks learning about art and his. I remember getting a postcard from her one afternoon, something she had written on the back while sitting at a cafe near the Mediterranean coast. It was simple, but it made me realize just how far she had. Sometimes it's hard to hear your own voice over all the noise, but when you take the time to stop and listen to the quiet, that's when you hear what you need to. It was one of the most profound things I'd ever read from it. Was as if Maya had found a new way of understanding herself, not just through the noise of helping others or the pressures of constantly being a leader. She was reconnecting with the things that made her happy, with the pieces of herself that had been lost in the rush to heal up. One day, a few months later, she called me. Her voice was calm, steady. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what's next." I listened closely, knowing that this moment was important. Maya had spent so much time building something meaningful, but she had always felt like there was something more to discover about herself, something beyond the program and the work she had been in. Now I could hear in her voice that she was finally ready to answer that question. "I've decided I'm going to go back to school," she continued. "I want to understand more about trauma, about the way the mind heals. I want to help people, but in a different way, on a deeper." I could feel my heart swell with pride. Maya had always been passionate about helping others, But this decision felt like the beginning of a new chapter for her own, where she could explore the roots of healing, not just the surf. "That's amazing, Maya," I said, my voice filled with excitement, "for you've already helped so many people, and now you're going to learn even more about how to help them. I know you're going to be incredible." She laughed softly, the sound of it filled with content. "I've learned a lot already, but there's so much more I want to understand. I think this will give me the tools I need to make an even bigger impact. I don't know where it will take me, but I could hear the peace in her voice now, the quiet confidence that had been growing inside her ever since she had taken in that first step. She wasn't rushing into the future anymore. She was allowing it to unfold naturally. She had finally given herself permission to be the person she was, not the person everyone expected her. A few months later, Maya enrolled in a university to study psychology. She was excited, nervous, and ready to start this new. I visited her during her first semester, and when I walked into her new apartment, I was amazed at the change, and she looked calm, centered, and full of purpose, but there was also a likeness to her, an openness to the world around her that hadn't been there. "I think I'm finally figuring out who I am outside of everything I've done," she told me one night as we sat together in her living room sipping tea for the first time in my life. "I'm not rushing to be something, I'm just be." It was a quiet revelation, but it was profound. Maya had spent so many years running first to escape her past, and then to save others, that she hadn't given herself the time to just exist, to simply be herself. She was living for herself, not for anyone else's expectations, and it was in that stillness, in that space of just being, that she found the strength to move. "I'm proud of you, Maya," I said, feeling a lump form in my throat. She smiled, that same warm smile that had been there when I first met her, but now there was a depth to her tone that came from years of growth pain, and "I'm just getting started," she said quietly. Her eyes filled with a quiet resolve. "This is just the B." And as I sat there with her, I realized that Maya's journey wasn't about any single moment or accomplishment. It was about the process, the ongoing journey of learning, growing. And Maya had faced the darkest moments of her life and had come through them not just as a survivor, but as someone who was learning to thrive. Her story was still unfolding, but whatever came next, I knew that Maya was ready for it. She had discovered her strength, her purpose, and most importantly, her. And now she was on her way to creating a future that was entirely her own.